The scripture on which today's teaching is based comes from Matthew 13, 44 to 46. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again, and then in his joy went and sold all he had and bought that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. When he found one of great value, he went away and sold everything he had and bought it. This is God's word. There have been some famous treasure hunts throughout history. It's amazing what the promise of treasure, how it can stir up the human spirit, a spirit of discovery, a spirit of adventure, to venture forth and try to find this treasure that's supposed to be out there. A recent one was from Forrest Fenn, who was an art dealer. And in the late 90s, he got sick with what he thought was a terminal illness. And so he decided to hide a treasure chest, which he filled with gold nuggets, rare coins, jewelry, and gemstones. And he said it was worth a couple $1 million. And he wrote about it in his memoir, which was published in 2010. And he said he left several clues. And he said it's somewhere in the Rocky Mountains north of Santa Fe. And so all these people began to try to decipher these clues and look for this treasure. And it led to all kinds of lawlessness. It led to damaging of national parks, breaking and entering, people risking their lives, even several people losing their lives in search of this treasure. But in 2020, the treasure was found, and the different parts were sold off and auctioned for $1.3 million. So congratulations to the person who found that treasure. But it's just interesting how this promise of treasure stirs up the human spirit. It stirs up this search that we have deep inside us. Even the gold rush in California a couple hundred years ago just captured the imaginations of people not only across our country, but all throughout the world. People uprooted their lives to move to California in search of this promised treasure and how it could change their lives. Today, we're looking at two short parables of Jesus. We've been going through a series on the parables of Jesus, and today we come to two short parables that's all about how the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure that, if we find it, is worth more than anything else we can discover in life, and which promises to transform everything about our lives. And this is the kind of life and this is the kind of treasure that Jesus offers. And so we're going to look at this under three headings. First, the search for treasure, the cost of the treasure, and the joy over the treasure. So the search, the cost, and the joy. So let's begin with the search for treasure. Jesus, in both of these parables, we see that whether it's the worker in the field or it's the merchant of fine pearls, both of them actually find a treasure. They have to search for this treasure, and it has to be found. Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is something that has to be found. It's something that you have to search for. And which is interesting, because what kind of kingdom do you have to search for? If there's a new political leader in a country that comes on the scene and they say, you know, the regime I'm trying to bring in, it's not going to be clear what it's all about. You have to search for it. It's not going to be evident on the surface. You know, most people are going to be like, you need to work on your messaging a little bit. You need a new campaign manager. Like, how are you going to come on the scene and tell us that we're not going to understand what the change is that you're bringing? But that's what Jesus is saying here. He's saying the kingdom of heaven that I'm bringing in, that's happening in your midst right now, is something that won't be obvious on the surface. It's something that you have to search for. And all of us today, living in our modern world, we are all on a search for some kind of treasure. We all have a deep longing for deep personal, emotional fulfillment in our lives that we're seeking in some place, somewhere in this world. And a couple of professors at Princeton, Benjamin and Jenna Silber-Story, they talked about this in a recent book that they titled "Why We Are Restless: The Modern Quest for Contentment." And they talk about how in our modern world, we are shaped to expect so much out of life, to expect so much out of this world, That our expectations have been raised so high because we believe that something in this world is going to satisfy that deep hunger and longing for fulfillment that we all have. And this wasn't always the case because in earlier times, people didn't always expect to be happy. Life often felt out of their control. Hardship and suffering were a normal part of life. And so a lot of religions, a lot of philosophies said this kind of satisfaction that you're looking for, that's lasting, that's deep, it's not going to be found in this life, in this world, but you can look for it in another life, in another world. But what we've done in our modern world is we've disenchanted this world. It's been removed of all sources of transcendence, all sources of spiritual meaning and significance. And so we have to find satisfaction in this world and in this life. And we've been taught to expect that we can find that, and that you can find that kind of satisfaction through your own efforts, through working really hard, through being, employing the right strategies and looking in the right places. And so this is why we live in a world in which we are all striving. And we live in a city, in New York, in which we're all striving. And we're working so hard, and we're striving so hard because we believe that if we attain that career success, if we meet that right person, if we pull the right levers and pursue the right strategies and do the right things with our lives, then we can experience that kind of deep, lasting satisfaction in this life. And that's why we're working so hard. It's why we're expecting so much. It's why we're living with such intensity in so many different areas of our lives. It's why we're pursuing this constant pursuit of perfection, of satisfaction. And in a place like New York, in a modern world like we live in, not many of us are very content with mediocrity. We don't move to a place like New York so we can just settle. I just want to have a mediocre career, I just want to have a mediocre love life. I just want to settle for just mediocre. That's what I've been dreaming about my whole life. Not many of us are like that. We're expecting a lot, and we're working really hard to attain it. But these authors, they say that's also why we're restless. Because when we achieve prosperity and success, so oftentimes it feels hollow. We're not able to experience the kind of love and approval and adulation from people that we so desperately seek and want. And so we are restless, and we're constantly seeking change. And so if we're not finding in one thing, then maybe we need to find it in something else. Maybe we need to pursue a new career. Maybe we need new pursuits, new hobbies, new enjoyments in life. Maybe we need a new relationship. Maybe I need a new love interest. Maybe I need to travel to new places or move to a new city, get in circles with new people, and it's going to be found somewhere else. And so we're restless. We're constantly seeking after change. We also want to change the world. We want to change our circumstances, and we expect that we can make that happen in our own power. And so we intensely pursue change in society, in the world. We have these high expectations that have been raised so high. But our culture also teaches us if you're not able to achieve that satisfaction, then it's all your fault. Because it's in your power. You're able to do it. It's out there. You can find it. But if you're not able to achieve it, then, it's all on you. And so our culture is shaping us to feel disappointed with ourselves, feel disappointed with our lives. If we're not satisfied, it's not because of something wrong out there, it's because of you. Because you're a failure. Or if there's obstacles out there, maybe it's other people. Maybe it's a group of people that's trying to, that's blocking you from achieving your goals, achieving your dreams. But no matter what it is, our culture is shaping us to believe that we can find such deep, lasting satisfaction in this world. And this is our modern condition. And not many people said it better than Tocqueville, who a couple centuries ago in the 1830s, Tocqueville, that perceptive observer of American culture, he said, "No one strives harder than Americans to pursue this elusive happiness. And yet, Americans are restless in the midst of our abundance, and so often sad." Doesn't that capture so much of our modern condition? That we expect so much out of life. Our expectations have been raised so high of our satisfaction in this world, and yet we're constantly disappointed, constantly not feeling like it's fully satisfying these deep longings that we have. And so we have become restless. We're a whole country striving for this kind of happiness, and yet experiencing a whole lot of disappointment. And so into this kind of culture, here comes Jesus with this parable, and he says, there is a treasure that's able to satisfy you. There is a treasure that's worth giving up everything else for, because it's that precious, that valuable. But it's not in the places that you expected. It's not in the places that your culture has taught you to look, because this is like a treasure that's hidden in a field. It's not obvious on the surface. You kind of have to dig. You kind of have to search for it. You see, as much as our culture has disenchanted this world, Jesus says, no, that disenchantment, if you look for that satisfaction in the things of this world, then it's going to become like a dumb idol that breaks the hearts of its worshipers. But if you allow it to point to the truer reality, the truer source of happiness and fulfillment that's found in this treasure, in the kingdom, that's found in Jesus, then it's leading you in the right direction. You know, in these two parables, Jesus talks about two kinds of people who are on different kinds of search. Because in the first parable, we see someone working in a field, and they're not really looking for a treasure. They're kind of just working in a field. They're working class. They're out doing manual labor. And then all of a sudden, they just come upon this treasure in the field. And actually, you know, in those days, that would happen, not all the time, but occasionally, because there were no banks where people could store their treasures. And so when there was instability in society, when there was thieves, marauders, when there was wars, people would oftentimes put their treasure and hide it in the ground. And so once in a while, you know, someone working out in the field, they might find this treasure out in a field. But in the second parable, we have a merchant of fine pearls. This is not a manual laborer. They're not working. They're upper class. Like they enjoy the fine things in life. They're looking for fine pearls. This is their business. But one day they come across this one pearl. That's the most precious pearl they've ever found. You know, there's different kinds of people in our world today, different ways that people stumble upon Jesus or find Jesus. Some people are on a very deliberate, intentional, spiritual search for truth. They try different religions, different philosophies, different ways of life. And finally, one day, in Jesus, they find, here's what I've been looking for my whole life. But there's other people who are not living that kind of intentional search kind of way. And they're just going about their everyday, going about their lives. And then one day, they just stumble across this treasure in Jesus. And they're like, wow, look what I found. Look at this. Jesus is describing all kinds of different people, all kinds of ways we live our lives. And yet, what's common to everyone is that once you find Jesus, once you find the kingdom, you find something that's worth more than everything else you've ever come across in your life. You see, this treasure, the wonder in it, the beauty in it, the glory in it is not evident on the surface, but Jesus says, but if you look for it, if you search, if you get underneath the surface, if you get beneath the caricatures of the Christian faith and who Jesus is, if you're able to fix your eyes and begin to see the wonder and the glory that's found in the gospel of Jesus Christ, you can find this kind of treasure. It's available to you. So first, we do see the search for treasure. But the second thing we see is there's also a cost to the treasure. In both parables, we see that whether it was the field worker, whether it was the merchant, both of them had to sell everything they had in order to obtain the treasure. See, the only way we can take hold of the treasure of the kingdom is if we let go, is if we're willing to let go and give up everything else that we hold onto so dear in our lives. It's by selling everything we have. Now, this doesn't mean that we can buy the kingdom through our commitment to Jesus. That's not what Jesus means by these parables. It doesn't mean that, if you just really sell yourself out for Jesus, if you give him everything, that's the way that you earn and merit his favor. That's the way you earn the kingdom. No, that's not what Jesus is saying. He's saying you're not earning the kingdom by how fully committed you are. He's saying by being fully committed, that's the way that you make room in your life to receive the kingdom. You see, imagine someone is gifting you like an upgrade in all your furniture in your home. They're giving you, just an expensive sofa that costs like what? Like they're giving you this expensive dining table, just this expensive set to just like upgrade everything in your home. But in order to make room to receive that, you actually have to get rid of all the old stuff because there's no space. You need to get rid of it in order to make room for the gift that's being given to you. See, that's what Jesus is saying here. He's saying in order to receive the gift of the kingdom that I'm giving, in order to make room for this treasure in your life, you have to sell off everything else that's in its way. See, the cost of the treasure is that it'll cost us everything. It's going to cost us our whole lives. There's no half measures. There's no 1 foot in, 1 foot out. It's all or nothing. That's the only way that Jesus offers to come into our lives. See, Jesus will not come in as an add-on to our real priorities in life. Like if our real priorities in life are getting ahead, success, advancing in my career, romantic dreams, whatever it is, like we have our goals that we have in life. And if we think, oh, Jesus is just going to come in so I can, get into this school, so I can get this job, just so I can have a successful romantic life, just so I can, move along in my career. If that's the real reason, if that's how we want to invite Jesus into our life, Jesus says, no, that's not the way that I come into anybody's life. The only way you can receive me is as the center of your life, around which everything else has to revolve. I won't be just another self-help book that you can add to your collection. It's like, oh, lose some weight, change my eating habits, work on my career, work on this skill or that, work on my spiritual life. I'll just add a little bit of Jesus. And that's not how Jesus comes. See, anyone who's actually considered who Jesus is and the claims that he made and who he claimed to be and what he claimed to do, anybody who's truly understood who Jesus was, nobody's ever responded like lukewarmly to Jesus. Everybody's response to Jesus was extreme. Either they rejected him and they hated him, or they came bowing, giving their entire lives to Jesus. I enjoy sports, and in sports like basketball and football, when you build a team, there's different kinds of players that you can add to your team, whether through trades or the draft. There are some players who fit well into different kinds of systems that a team is trying to employ. And then there's other players who, the whole team needs to adjust to that player. There was a player who was traded in the NBA last year, and he said, I don't play in a system, I am a system. It's like everybody, other players need to revolve around me, that's who I am. It's a very, very confident player there, but just trying to illustrate this point that Jesus doesn't come into our lives in order to revolve around the priorities that we already have. He doesn't fit in that way. When he comes into our lives, we need to revolve every one of our priorities around Jesus and be willing to obey and to submit every area of our lives. You see, Jesus, he promises to give us more than we could have ever imagined in our lives. But he also expects and demands more than we could have ever dared to hope. See, this is how Jesus comes. He promises to change our lives. When he comes in, he promises to infuse our lives with a light and a joy and a gladness and a peace beyond anything we can find anywhere else. But we have to make room for him to come in. In order to receive this gift, we have to let go of all the other things that we're clinging to with our hands. C.S. Lewis gave a great illustration of this. He said, imagine yourself as a living house. God comes in to rebuild that house. At first, perhaps, you can understand what he's doing. He's getting the drains right, stopping the leaks in the roof, and so on. You knew that those jobs needed doing, and so you're not surprised. But presently, he starts knocking the house about in a way that hurts abominably and does not seem to make any sense. What on earth is he up to? The explanation is that he's building quite a different house from the one you thought of. throwing out a new wing here, putting on an extra floor there, running up towers, making courtyards. You thought you were being made into a decent little cottage, but he is building a palace. He intends to come and live in it himself. See, Jesus, he's not just trying to fix some drains that are leaking, a leak in the roof. He's trying to build an entire new kind of home to transform the little cottage of our lives into a wonderful palace. And in order to do that, we need to make room. We need to adjust our lives for his presence, his glory to enter in. See, it will cost us everything. It's going to cost us everything we have. We have to sell everything we have in order to put our hands on this treasure. That means we need to give up things like our righteousness. We need to give up our moral standing. Whatever pride you had in the kind of life you lived before morally, Jesus says, in order to receive me, you have to admit that you are a broken, lost sinner. And you have to humble yourself in order to receive me into your life. You have to give that up. You have to give up the things that you boasted of that gave you so much identity. And Jesus says, in order to receive me into your life, you need to find your identity in me and make me your boast. If you're ashamed of me, if you're ashamed to identify with Jesus in public, in society, because of the way people will look at you, you got to give that up as well. You got to give up the esteem and honor of people sometimes in order to receive Jesus. It means he's going to invade and revolutionize every area of our lives. There's no area of our lives in which Jesus will not come in and completely throw upside down and change. We have to be willing to give up our sexuality. You know, our world has not only disenchanted the world, but it's also disenchanted sex. See, sex has been removed of its tremendous meaning and significance. And we say, oh, sex is just an appetite. It's just something we do. That's all sex is? Well, let's stop treating it like this old, traditional, old-fashioned way. And yet, none of us are actually able to believe that and live that out and treat sex as just an appetite, because every one of us knows through experience that sex is more than just an appetite. If someone wrongs us sexually, it cuts deeper than other kinds of wrongs. It feels like it's more important, more significant. It's why many of us, turning into sexuality into our identity in a way that defines us, because we know that sex has a greater meaning than just something we do with our free time. And Jesus says, if you receive me into your life, I'm going to revolutionize your sexuality. If you submit this area of your life to me, I'm able to restore it and make it whole so that it fits into its proper place in your life. Every area of our lives, the way we handle our money, the way we treat people, the way we evaluate people in society, every single area of our lives, Jesus is going to come in to revolutionize. See, to receive the treasure of Jesus means to take up the cost of giving up control and authority over our lives. And naturally, the question here is, if you are a follower of Jesus, is there an area of your life that you're not willing to cede control and authority over? And Jesus, not just trying to make us feel bad, but he says, in order to experience me as your treasure, in order to experience the life and the glory and the joy that I've come to bring to you, it requires you letting go and surrendering that to me. And this is not an easy thing to hear. This is not something that a lot of us like to hear. And yet, the only way we will be willing to pay the cost of this treasure is if we see point number 3, the joy over the treasure. Jesus says in the first parable, this worker in the field, in his joy, he went and sold all he had and bought that field. In his joy. Even though it meant giving everything up. He didn't do it with drudgery. He didn't do it with reluctance. He didn't do it dragging his feet. In his joy, he gave up everything gladly because he saw the worth of this treasure, the worth of this pearl. You see, this is the heart of the Christian faith. This is the heart of these two parables that Jesus is telling us today. This is how much the kingdom of heaven is worth. This is how glorious it is to have Jesus come into your life, that he is able to give us a joy that is better than anything else that we can taste in this world. See, a lot of times our understanding of religion, it feels like, oh, it's so much duty. It's so much drudgery. It's so much discipline. Religious people, they're so grumpy. They're not happy. And Jesus is like, no, that is not the kind of life that I've come to bring. That's not the kind of life. I didn't die on the cross and give my life so you could live a life of drudgery. I came to bring you joy. That's what Jesus is saying here. Where we're gladly willing to give up everything. And the testimony of every single person who's ever really, truly encountered Jesus is that they speak of this joy that's bubbling up so deep in their hearts that only is found in Jesus. St. Augustine lived many centuries ago, and as he was wrestling with the things of the Christian faith, he prayed this prayer: Lord, grant me purity, but not yet. I don't want to give up those things just yet. Oh man, they're so good, I can't lose them. But as he began to discover the treasure that's found in Jesus, listen to his prayer. He said, how sweet all at once it was for me to be rid of those fruitless joys which I had once feared to lose. You drove them from me, you who are the sovereign joy. You drove them from me and took their place, you who are sweeter than all pleasure. The Christian life is a life of joy. It's a life of better joy, a greater joy than all the other lesser joys that we can experience in this world. See, have you discovered Jesus as a treasure? Not just an authority that you need to obey and submit to, not just rational intellectual arguments that you're convinced by, but a treasure that you feel and you value in your heart. Have you discovered Jesus as your treasure? Before I met Jesus when I was in college, I was a very dark and angry person. There was no joy in my life. I was bitter about many things. I was holding on to all kinds of pains, all kinds of wounds and resentments, and I literally never smiled. I remember in our yearbook, one of the questions that's asked of people, what do you want to leave behind for other people? And this one girl was like, I want to leave Paul a smile. Can you smile one time, Paul? Can we see that once? And I literally never smiled. I don't think my smiling muscles were ever exercised in the first couple decades of my life. And those are some dark years for me. I was doing drugs every single day. I was drinking a lot. I was failing in school. I was throwing away my life. I thought there was no purpose. I was, just this is how I was. I was an angry and lost little punk. And yet, in college, just one day, I wasn't even looking for it. I was so lost, and yet, out of the blue, I began to experience something new, something fresh, where Jesus began to make his way into my life. And I discovered this joy and this light and this love and this glory and this richness that I had not found anywhere else in the world. All of the things I tried were so hollow, so shallow, so empty compared to this joy that I was beginning to taste. And it was like, oh man, Lord, I'll give up everything. Oh my, you are so good. This is so much better. What is this joy that I'm tasting? This is the life that Jesus has come to give. This is not the way I understood religion. This is not what I saw. But Jesus, this is what you're offering me? This is the kind of life that you're inviting me into? You see, a life of joy is what Jesus is offering every single one of us when we follow him, when we worship him. And this can be found, this can be discovered, this can be experienced in the life of a Christian. You see, I was amazed to find that Jesus would love someone like me. He will come into my life? Me? Look at me, look what I've done with my life. And yet he considers me a treasure? You see, the message of the gospel is that we are his treasure, that we are his costly treasure, that it cost Jesus everything. It cost him his life. He left his mansions of glory. He lost his privileges of divinity. He lost his comforts. He lost everything, and he became a human being. And he lived a weak and frail life on this earth. He died a death on the cross. He gave up everything. Because when he saw you, when he saw me, he saw our treasure. And he said, it is worth paying this cost. That's how much he loves us. That's how much he's willing to give us. He held nothing back. And Jesus says, if I was willing to give you everything, there's nothing I'm going to withhold. How can you hold back any part of your life from me? How can you hold back this area of your life? Feel like, no, I need to hold on to it. I can't give it up. Jesus says, all the things you fear to lose, once you lay them down, you'll begin to taste the sweeter joy than all the pleasure, than everything else you've ever come across, anything else you've ever known. Jesus has come to offer us this kind of life. And so if you're not a follower of Jesus, I just want to encourage you. I'm so grateful you're here, but just consider, have you looked underneath the surface, beyond the caricatures of what Christianity is like, what the church is like, who Jesus is like? And have you begun to see the treasure that he is? If you haven't, keep looking. I want to encourage you. But if you are a Christian, if you're a follower of Jesus, and today you're not experiencing joy in your Christian life, maybe you're feeling down on yourself, depressed about your life, maybe you're feeling in the darkness because of all the different things that are going on. Jesus says, I've come to give you joy. There's a joy to be tasted, a joy to be had. This kind of life that explodes upon us in Jesus Christ. This is the kind of life he's inviting us into. This is the life he offers us. And the way it's found, the way it's tasted, is through seeing Jesus as our treasure. You need to look on him with the eyes of faith. It's why we come to church. It's why we sing songs. It's why we worship. It's why we pray. It's why we read our Bible. We look upon Jesus until our eyes are open to see that he's beautiful, that he's worthy, that he's a treasure, that he's better than anything and everything else. And when you see that, and as you discipline yourself to see that day by day, you gladly give up anything else because he's that much better. He's that good. So let's look to Jesus. Would you please pray with me? Our Father, what a gift that you've offered us, Lord. A life of deep, lasting joy beyond, that's better than all the poor and pale imitations that we've experienced in life. Would you rekindle a longing and a thirst after the joy that's found in Jesus? No matter where we are in life today, what kind of hard times, what kind of darkness we are, shine out your light. Invite us back in, Lord, that we may walk in the light and the joy of Jesus Christ. Amen.